Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Digging Deeper, where we take Sunday's scriptures and look at a verse or a word that's not in the sermon so that we can dig that much deeper into God's word. It was an absolutely beautiful day here, and so I wanted to be outside. The weather's getting cooler. It feels like fall. It's downright chilly this morning, and I love this weather. So I wanted to be outside, and I'm glad you guys could all join me, and I hope you're enjoying the cooler weather too here. I wanted to start today's episode just by telling you the story of a man I know. Uh, his mother, I think this is where I should start. His mom died in childbirth with his younger brother, and that really, I think, deeply impacted him. I think he had some attachment issues with his family because of that, because of not growing up with his mom, and also his siblings were really abusive to him. So he had a fairly tough upbringing in that sense, not being with his mom, and his siblings were just incredibly like very abusive to him. And anyway, when he got old enough, when he was 17, he left home and he got a job in the restaurant industry. And he eventually worked his way up in the restaurant industry to being a manager for a really nice restaurant, like just Class A restaurant. And so he was doing well for himself. And and just when he really thought life was settling for him, someone in the business that he worked with accused him of sexual assault. Now, I wasn't there, but I believe he was innocent. I believe he was. And anyway, he was convicted and he was sentenced to some time in jail. So he served his time in jail and eventually got out, got back into the restaurant industry, and once again worked his way up in again really nice restaurants to a manager position. Um, and this time, his life stabilized. He was able to get married and had a couple of kids. And I hope you know that the person I'm telling you about is Joseph from the book of Genesis. Yep, the biblical character of Joseph. That is pretty much leaving out a few details, but that's pretty much Joseph's story. He came through a lot, and if you know Joseph's story, you know that I got us right up to the point to where he was manager in Pharaoh's household. There's no one as great as him in the land of Egypt except for Pharaoh himself. And Joseph helped Pharaoh to manage some really tough times. There were 7 years in which the Egyptian harvests were just plentiful and great, and Joseph knew, God had revealed it to him, that they needed to store up during those times. And so he stored up during those times. And then Joseph also knew that 7 years of famine, 7 years in which the harvests were decimated. They weren't good at all. Were coming, and the people, not only in Egypt but throughout the world, would be hungry, and that included those brothers that were abusive to him as a kid. That would include his dad, who loved him, who, for all his dad knew, Joseph was dead. And so he was on the verge of meeting his family again. They were going to come to Egypt to seek out bread to eat. And when Joseph had these two kids, this was before he met his brothers, and and there's something significant in the way that Joseph named his two children. He named them Manasseh and Ephraim. And we're going to explore those two names, but it's significant because when Joseph finally meets his brothers, I think a lot of trauma from earlier on, what they did to him, came up. He didn't treat them great at first, but if you know the end of the Joseph story, he was able to forgive them for the incredible abuse that they had done to him and the evil that they had done to him in those younger years before he left home. He was able to forgive them. And I'm intrigued by Joseph. How do you forgive people that hurt you so deeply? So deeply that those bad tapes play over and over and over in your head, even though you've moved far away, you haven't seen those people forever. Um, how do you get to a place where you actually forgive them? I don't know if you've had people like that in your life. I have, and it's tough. And I think Joseph's story gives us some clues into how we get to a place of forgiveness. I also want to say that everything I'm sharing here, I'm passing on from a teacher of mine. Um, in college. His name is Jerry Root. He's on YouTube. You can look up his videos, the way that Joseph story was told. I got that from him. I thought it was a great way to tell the Joseph story. And the insights into these names. Now, these insights aren't original. They're there in the text, but I think the way that they were played out by Professor Dr. Root was compelling to me, and so I wanted to share it with you. So I want to give credit where credit's due. So Joseph names his kids Manasseh and Ephraim. Those names mean making to forget and making fruitful. So Joseph says, I'm naming my kids Manasseh and Ephraim because Manasseh, God has made me forget my afflictions and my father's house. That means my family and my family of origin. And and I name my second son Ephraim because God has made me fruitful in this land that God's brought me to. I think those are two keys to coming to a place of forgiveness and a place where we can move on fruitfully. First, making to forget. I don't think what this means is just amnesia, where Joseph just didn't uh, remember, just kind of blocked out or suppressed or pushed down those memories of what happened. Um, I think what's going on here is Joseph is remembering his father's house and his afflictions in a different way. Instead of those just being traumatizing memories, I wonder what Joseph remembered when he thought back there. That he could name the evil, but that didn't preoccupy him. That's not what he was preoccupied with when he thought back. Maybe he was preoccupied with the good from his father's household. Maybe he was preoccupied um, with with what God was doing through the bad. Maybe he was able to, instead of filter out the good that happened so long ago and just focus on the negative, that he was finally able to see the good in those times. And then the second name, Ephraim, because God has made me fruitful, Joseph said. Um, Ephraim comes from the name from the verb para to be fruitful, and so God has made me fruitful. I think a second key to learning to forgive is to see the abundance of what God has provided right now around us. So whatever we've been through, where are we at right now, and what has God provided? I know for me, sometimes I'm in a position in which I want to be open-handed and say, God, I don't have what I need. Please provide. And sometimes that's the truth. Sometimes um, I'm looking for God's provision and I need God's provision. Sometimes the response is, no, God says, Alex, I've provided everything you need. Open your eyes to the abundance right now. And I think when we can look back and see the good, even in trying times, and look around us and see the good that God's provided us right now, it puts us in a position of openness inside, puts us in a position where we're not coming from a place of worry or scarcity, but a place of trusting God's abundance, trusting God's provision and guidance for us. And I think when we reach there, forgiveness becomes humanly possible. It becomes possible for us. So I hope this insight into Joseph's story has been helpful for you. I know it was for me. I'm thankful for Dr. Jerry Root. He teaches at Wheaton College in Illinois for opening up the Joseph story for me. And if this has been fruitful for you and it would be helpful to someone you know, feel free to share it with them, to forward it along to them. Peace be with you, and I'll see you Sunday.